I'm Leah, 34, female, and my husband, Isaac, left our 7-year marriage for a woman he considered an upgrade. He was influenced by his sister, Serafina, a self-proclaimed life coach who believed settling was a sin. Now, after his upgrade, unceremoniously dumped him, he wants to come back. He seems to think my heart is a door he can just unlock with an old key, forgetting that I'm the one who changed the locks. Our life hadn't always been a battleground of aspirations versus reality. For the first 5 years, it was simple. And I loved that simplicity. I'm an architect, but my passion isn't in designing sterile glass skyscrapers or cold, minimalist mansions. I renovate old homes. I love finding the hidden character in a forgotten Victorian or coaxing the warm soul out of a neglected craftsman bungalow. I build futures by honoring the past. Our home was my masterpiece, a 1920s brick house we'd bought in a state of near ruin. I spent 2 years lovingly restoring it, pouring my heart into every blueprint, every salvaged floorboard, every custom-built cabinet. Isaac, at the time, seemed to share my joy. He'd bring me coffee as I worked late over the plans, his eyes shining as he'd say, "You're not just building a house, Leah. You're building our home." Isaac worked as a style consultant at a luxury department store. He had a natural eye for beauty and a quiet charm that put his high-net-worth clients at ease. He loved making people feel good about themselves. In the beginning, his job was just that, a job. He'd come home, shed the world of high fashion and exorbitant price tags, and sink into the comfortable reality of our life. We'd cook dinner together, watch old movies, and work in the garden. It was a good life, a real life. The crack in our foundation didn't appear overnight. It started as a hairline fracture, and its name was Serafina. Isaac's younger sister was a whirlwind of transient philosophies, all gleaned from wellness retreats and the endless scroll of social media. She called herself an influencer and a life coach, her primary qualifications being a perfectly curated Instagram feed and an unwavering belief that good vibes could solve global poverty. To Serafina, our stable, happy life was anathema. It was, in her favorite word, stagnant. I remember the first time her influence truly pricked my skin. It was our 5th anniversary. I had prepared a special dinner, setting up a table in the backyard under the string lights I'd hung from the old oak tree. Isaac had just come home, and I could hear him on the phone with her in the other room. His voice was different when he talked to Serafina, higher, more anxious, as if he were constantly auditioning for her approval. "No, Sarah, we're just staying in," he said, his voice a low murmur. A pause. "Well, of course, a trip would be nice, but Leah's been so busy with the Henderson project." "No, it's not an excuse." He walked into the kitchen where I was plating the food, the phone still pressed to his ear. He gave me a weak, apologetic smile. "Listen, I have to go." "Yes, I'll think about what you said." "Okay. Bye." He hung up and the energy in the room instantly deflated. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Yeah, fine. Just Serafina." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "She was just saying we should be in Paris for our anniversary, not in our backyard. That we need to create peak experiences instead of just this." He gestured vaguely at the beautiful meal, the twinkling lights, the life we had built. For the first time, I felt him see it all through her eyes, not as cozy and romantic, but as small and lacking. The steak tasted a little less savory that night. The second instance was more direct. A few months later, I landed a major contract to lead the historical restoration of a landmark downtown library. It was a huge step for my small firm, a project I had dreamed of for years. I was ecstatic, practically floating when I told Isaac the news over dinner. That he was happy for me, but his congratulations felt muted. "Wow, Leah, that's amazing," he said, swirling the wine in his glass. "That's a big deal." Later that evening, he was on a video call with Serafina. I was in my office, but I could hear their conversation drifting down the hall. "It's a 2-year project," Isaac explained. 2 years. Serafina's voice was sharp, dripping with disdain. So she's basically chaining herself to a dusty old building for 2 years? Isaac, what about your life? What about your ambitions? Does she ever think about that? You're meant for more than just being the supportive husband to a woman who likes old buildings. You need to be building your own empire, not just helping her patch up someone else's. The phrase, a woman who likes old buildings, stung. It was such a gross oversimplification of my passion and my career. But what hurt more was Isaac's silence. He didn't defend me. He didn't tell his sister that my dreams were just as valid as his, that our partnership was about supporting each other. He just absorbed her poison like a sponge. The final, and most telling, example came about a year before the end. Isaac started managing the accounts of a few extremely wealthy clients, and the exposure to that world began to change him. He started dressing differently, talking differently. He traded his comfortable sweaters for razor-sharp suits he couldn't really afford and started peppering his sentences with jargon about portfolios and assets. Serafina, of course, fanned the flames. We were at a family dinner when my brother, a high school science teacher, mentioned he and his wife were saving up for a down payment on a small house. It'll be tight, my brother said with a happy shrug. But we'll make it work. It's all we need. Serafina let out a theatrical sigh. Oh, that's all we need a mindset. It's so limiting. Why aspire to what you need when you can manifest what you deserve? She then looked directly at Isaac. You get it, don't you, bro? You're out there every day, surrounded by people who don't just settle. They soar. You can't let other people's small dreams hold you back. Her eyes flicked to me for a fraction of a second, and the implication was clear. I was the small dream. I was the anchor holding her brother back from his glorious ascent into the stratosphere of wealth and status. Isaac just sat there, looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. He didn't look at me. He just stared at his plate, a man caught between two worlds, already starting to believe he belonged in the one that glittered more brightly. The crack was widening, and I was beginning to fear the whole structure was about to come crashing down. The change in Isaac was like the slow turning of a season, almost imperceptible day by day, but undeniable when you looked back over a month or two. The man I married, the one who found joy in the grain of reclaimed wood and the quiet hum of a Sunday morning, was fading. In his place was a stranger who spoke a language of luxury I didn't understand and didn't care to learn. It began with his phone. It was suddenly an extension of his hand, not for calls from friends or family, but for the endless, glossy scroll of social media. He followed accounts that showcased opulent lifestyles, yachts in Monaco, penthouse apartments in Dubai, watches that cost more than my car. Serafina's feed was his daily gospel. Her posts were a barrage of inspirational quotes plastered over images of her in exotic locations I knew she often visited on a shoestring budget, staying in hostels just out of frame. Stop building someone else's dream and start living your own, one post would read, over a picture of her meditating on a beach in Bali. The universe rewards bravery, not comfort, another would proclaim from a cafe in Florence. He started parroting her empty phrases. One evening, I was sketching out a plan for a pro bono project, designing a small community garden pavilion for a local neighborhood. I was excited about it, about creating something beautiful and functional for people who needed it. What's that? He asked, glancing over my shoulder, his face illuminated by the blue light of his phone. It's the pavilion design for the community garden on Miller Avenue, I said with a smile. I think it's really going to come together. He made a non-committal noise. That's nice, Leah. But is it elevating your brand? Serafina says every action you take should be a step up on the ladder of personal growth. Charity is fine, but it doesn't build capital, you know? Social or financial. I put my pencil down, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. It's not about capital, Isaac. It's about community. It's about giving back. Don't you remember we used to talk about this? People change, Leah, he said, not unkindly, but with a new, frustrating detachment. We evolve. We can't stay stuck in the same mindset forever. It was Serafina speaking through his mouth, her words cloaked in his voice. Then came Victoria. He never introduced me to her, not in person. She existed, at first, as a name dropped into conversation with calculated casualness. Victoria Beaumont. She was his newest, and wealthiest, client. She was a venture capitalist, a titan of industry who had built her empire from the ground up. She was, in Isaac's words, a force of nature. Victoria was in the store today, he'd say while we were making dinner. She just flew back from Singapore. She's thinking of acquiring a new tech startup. He'd say her name with a reverence that bordered on worship. He recounted her stories of boardroom battles and hostile takeovers as if they were epic poems. He admired her ruthlessness, mistaking it for strength. I'd listen, trying to be supportive, but a knot of dread was tightening in my stomach. He wasn't just impressed by her wealth, he was mesmerized by her power. She represented the world Serafina was constantly pushing him toward, a world of consequence, of high stakes, of importance. A world where restoring old houses and building community gardens seemed quaint and utterly insignificant. His wardrobe changed completely. He used his employee discount to its maximum, slowly replacing his entire closet. He spoke of investment pieces and the psychology of dressing for success. One afternoon, I came home to find a sleek, ridiculously expensive silver watch on our dresser. "What's this?" I asked, picking it up. It felt cold and heavy in my hand. "It's a gift," he said, a strange mix of pride and defensiveness in his tone. "From Victoria. A thank you for helping her curate her wardrobe for the Aspen Ideas Festival." A gift. A watch that cost more than our first car. I looked from the watch to his face, and I saw a man I barely recognized. The quiet joy he used to have was gone, replaced by a restless, hungry ambition. He wasn't just wearing new clothes. He was trying on a new identity, one tailored and gifted to him by others. My own unease grew into a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety. I felt like I was living with a ghost, the ghost of my husband. The real Isaac was disappearing, and this polished, ambitious stranger was taking his place. The silence between us grew louder than our conversations. Our home, my sanctuary, started to feel like a hotel lobby, a temporary space we were just passing through. I would work late in my office, surrounded by the comforting scent of old paper and drafting pencils, and I would feel a profound sense of loneliness. He would be in the living room, not watching our old movies, but scrolling, endlessly scrolling, through a life he desperately wanted and that I had no part in. The breaking point was a quiet Tuesday evening. He came home late, his face pale and set. He walked past me in the kitchen without a word and went straight to the bedroom. I followed him, my heart pounding a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. He was pulling a suitcase from the top of the closet. The sound of its wheels on our hardwood floor was the sound of my world cracking open. "Isaac?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What are you doing?" He turned to look at me, and for the first time in months, the ambitious facade was gone. He just looked lost and terribly sad. But his words, when they came, were not his own. They were practiced, rehearsed, a script written for him by his sister and his new idol. "I can't do this anymore, Leah," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this meant me. It meant our home. It meant our life. The sight of the suitcase on our bed was so cliché it was almost laughable. It was the kind of thing you see in a movie, a dramatic prop to signify the end. But in the quiet of our bedroom, with the soft evening light filtering through the windows and illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, it felt brutally, terrifyingly real. "What do you mean, you can't do this anymore?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. My hands were trembling, so I clasped them together behind my back. I felt like an architect inspecting a building after an earthquake, trying to assess the structural damage while the aftershocks were still rolling through. Isaac didn't look at me. He opened a drawer and began taking out socks, rolling them into neat, tight balls. The meticulousness of the action was unnerving. He was dismantling our life with the same care he used to fold a client's pocket square. "I mean this," he said. His gesture taking in the room, the house, the unseen landscape of our 7 years together. Us. I feel like I'm suffocating, Leah. The word hit me like a physical blow. Suffocating. He was suffocating in the home I had poured my soul into, in the life we had chosen together. Suffocating? I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. We have a good life, Isaac. We were happy. Were we? He finally looked up, and his eyes were full of a pity that was worse than anger. Or were we just comfortable? Serafina is right. Comfort is the enemy of growth. I've been so focused on being comfortable, on being what you wanted me to be, that I've lost sight of who I am supposed to be. Who I wanted you to be? I took a step forward, my voice rising. I never asked you to be anyone but yourself. The man I married loved this life. He loved this house. He loved me. That man didn't know what was possible, he shot back, his voice gaining an edge of defensiveness. He didn't know the world outside of this small, perfect little box you built for us. There it was. My work, my passion, my art, reduced to a box. The home that was my sanctuary was now his prison. The accusation hung in the air between us, ugly and sharp. He was twisting our shared history into a narrative of his oppression, and casting me as the unwitting jailer. He went back to packing, moving with a cold efficiency. Shirts, pants, toiletries. Each item he placed in the suitcase was a brick being removed from our foundation. So this is about Victoria, isn't it? I asked, the name feeling foreign and venomous on my tongue. He froze, his back to me. Victoria has nothing to do with this, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Don't lie to me, Isaac, I said, my own voice cracking. Not now. Not after everything. You've been a different person since you met her. You talk like her, you dress for her. This whole speech sounds like something she or your sister would write for you. He turned around slowly, his face a mask of weary resignation. Victoria showed me what's possible, he admitted, his voice low. She lives a life of consequence, Leah. She doesn't just exist, she commands. She builds empires. And you restore old buildings. He said it not as a fact, but as a judgment. In his new world, my life's work was a quaint hobby. And you think that's what you're meant for? To be some kind of accessory in her empire? I've outgrown this life, he said, the words falling like stones into the silence. I've outgrown you. I deserve more. I deserve a partner who challenges me, who pushes me, who exists on the same level. I've outgrown you. The two words echoed in the hollow space that had just opened up inside my chest. It was the cruelest thing he could have said. It wasn't just that he didn't love me anymore, it was that he saw me as a lesser being, a stepping stone he had now left behind on his grand journey to a better life. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and sharp, but I refused to let them fall. I would not give him the satisfaction of my complete collapse. I was a building, and though my foundations were shattered, I would not crumble. Not in front of him. So you're leaving me for her, I stated, my voice flat. I'm leaving to find myself, he corrected, a pathetic attempt at nobility. Victoria, she understands the path I'm on. She's willing to support me on it. Support you? I finally let out a harsh, humorless laugh. Isaac, she's a venture capitalist. They don't support things. They acquire them. They invest in assets they think will give them a return, and they divest when the asset stops performing. Do you really think you're a partner in this? Or are you just her latest acquisition? He flinched as if I'd slapped him. You don't know anything about it. I know you, I said softly, the anger draining away, leaving only a vast, empty sadness. Or at least, I thought I did. The man I married would have seen this for what it is. A fantasy. A cheap, glittering imitation of a life. He had no answer for that. He just zipped the suitcase. The sound was deafeningly final. He walked past me, pulling the suitcase behind him, its little wheels a mournful rumble on the floorboards I had so carefully sanded and sealed. He didn't look back. I stood there in the middle of our bedroom for a long time, listening to the sound of the front door opening and then closing with a soft, decisive click. The house was silent. It was no longer our home. It was just a house. Again. A structure filled with the ghosts of laughter and shared dreams. I finally sank onto the edge of the bed, the mattress still holding the faint impression of where he had been sitting. And as the last of the evening light faded outside, I finally allowed myself to break. The tears came, silent and hot, not for the man who had just walked out the door, but for the man he used to be, and for the beautiful, simple life we had lost. The first few weeks after Isaac left were a blur of muted color and muffled sound. The house, once my pride and sanctuary, felt vast and accusingly empty. Every room held a memory that ambushed me when I least expected it. The armchair in the living room where he used to read, the spot in the kitchen where he'd stand while I cooked, the hook by the door where his coat used to hang, they were all hollow spaces, painful reminders of the life that had been amputated. From mine, a grief is an architect of its own terrible design. It builds walls where there were once doorways and rooms with no windows. For days, I existed within its suffocating structure. I moved from the bed to the couch and back again. The work that had always been my refuge, my passion, now seemed pointless. The blueprints on my drafting table mocked me with their neat lines and promises of stable futures. How could I design homes for others when my own had been so completely demolished? My friends, bless them, formed a rotating guard. My best friend, Clara, would show up with bags of groceries and a refusal to take no for an answer. She wouldn't let me talk about him if I didn't want to, but she also wouldn't let me disappear into the silence. She'd put on music, make me eat, and talk about everything and nothing, a book she was reading, a funny story from her work, a ridiculous new reality show. She was giving me the gift of normalcy, a lifeline back to the world outside my own head. "You need to sell the house, Leah," she said gently one evening, about a month after he'd left. We were sitting on the porch, watching the fireflies begin to dot the twilight. The words felt like a betrayal. "I can't," I whispered. "I built this place." "I know," she said, her voice full of empathy. "You poured your heart into it. But it's not a home anymore, is it? It's a museum of a life that's over. And you're the only visitor, walking through the exhibits every day, torturing yourself. You can't build a new future when you're living in a monument to the past." She was right. As an architect, I knew it. Sometimes, a building is too damaged to be restored. The foundation is compromised, the load-bearing walls are cracked. The only way to move forward is to clear the site and start fresh. The decision to sell was the hardest I'd ever made, but once it was made, a small measure of peace settled in my heart. It was my first act of reclaiming my own life, my first blueprint for a future without him. Going through the house, packing up our shared existence into boxes, was an excruciating but necessary process. I found old photos of us, smiling and young, full of a hope that now seemed painfully naive. I packed them away in a box labeled "The Past," sealing it with tape. I found a silly souvenir he'd bought me on our first vacation, a cheap snow globe with a plastic palm tree inside. I held it for a moment, then placed it gently in the donation pile. The day I signed the papers with the real estate agent, Isaac called. It was the first time I'd heard his voice in 2 months. "I heard you're selling the house," he said, his tone unreadable. "Yes," I replied, my voice cool and professional. I was discussing a transaction, nothing more. There was a pause. "It's a shock," he said. I don't know what I thought." "You thought I'd just stay here, waiting?" I asked, a flicker of the old anger returning. "This house was our home, Isaac. There's no Yara anymore. It's time for me to move on." "Right. Of course. It's your house, he said quickly. You can do what you want with it. The call ended with an awkward silence, a dial tone severing the last official tie to our shared property. Selling the house was a clean break. I found a small, modern apartment downtown with a balcony overlooking the city. It was the opposite of our old house, new, clean, and holding no ghosts. It was a blank slate. I threw myself back into my work with a renewed focus. The library restoration project became my salvation. I buried myself in historical archives, in the meticulous details of cornice restoration and structural reinforcement. In healing the old, broken building, I was slowly beginning to heal myself. I worked long hours, fueled by coffee and the satisfaction of seeing something damaged slowly being made whole and beautiful again. I was beginning to feel like myself again. Not the old self, the Leah that had been one half of a marriage, but a new self. To me. I was Leah, an architect, a woman who had survived a devastating earthquake and was now carefully, thoughtfully, rebuilding. The grief was still there, but it was no longer a suffocating structure. It was more like a ruin I could visit from a distance, a part of my history, but not a place I had to live. I was drawing my own blueprints now, for a life that was entirely my own. The foundation was small, but it was solid, and it was mine. Life settled into a new rhythm, one dictated by the rising sun and the demands of my work, not by the presence or absence of another person. My new apartment, once sterile and unfamiliar, began to feel like home. I filled it with plants, with books, with the vibrant colors and textures I'd always loved. It was a space that reflected me, and only me. There were no ghosts in the closets, no sad memories clinging to the furniture. It was a testament to my survival. My work on the library project was all-consuming in the best possible way. It was a complex and beautiful puzzle, and I delighted in solving it piece by piece. I rediscovered the pure joy of creation, the deep satisfaction of bringing a vision to life. My colleagues and my team saw the change in me. The fragile, heartbroken woman who had returned to work months ago was gone. In her place was a confident, decisive leader. I was good at my job. I had always been good at my job, but I had somehow forgotten. Now, I remembered that of course, the world of Isaac and Victoria still existed, but it felt distant, like a story happening in another country. The only dispatches I received came, unsurprisingly, from Serafina's social media. My friends would occasionally mention it, usually with a grimace. "Did you see Serafina's latest post?" Clara asked one afternoon over coffee. "It's a picture of Isaac on a private jet. The caption is something like, 'Leveling up doesn't happen by accident. It's a choice.' The lack of self-awareness is staggering." I had muted both their accounts long ago, but curiosity was a stubborn little itch. That evening, I broke my own rule and navigated to Serafina's page. It was a polished, blindingly bright highlight reel of Isaac's new life. There he was, clinking champagne glasses with Victoria on a yacht, the ocean a perfect, impossible blue behind them. There he was in a tuxedo at some glittering gala, Victoria on his arm, her expression possessive and proud. There he was, standing beside a ridiculously expensive sports car, a gift from her, according to Serafina's gushing caption about the queen rewarding her king. In every photo, Isaac wore the same strained, handsome smile. He looked the part. He was wearing the right clothes, standing in the right places, holding the right drink. But his eyes were hollow. He looked like an actor playing a role he hadn't quite memorized, a man constantly afraid he was about to forget his lines. There was a tension in his posture, a stiffness in his smile that I, who had known his true, easy laughter, could spot a mile away. I felt a pang, but it wasn't jealousy. It was a strange, detached pity. He had gotten what he wanted. He had his life of a consequence. And he looked utterly, profoundly lost. I closed the app, the itch finally scratched, and felt a surprising wave of gratitude for my quiet apartment, my demanding job, and my simple, authentic life. I had chosen to restore something real, while he had chosen to live in a facade. Several more months passed. Autumn bled into winter. The library was taking shape, its grand old bones being dressed in their former glory. I was happy. Genuinely, calmly happy. The news came on a Tuesday, the same day of the week he had left. It came not from social media, but from a mutual acquaintance. A former neighbor named Mark who I ran into at the grocery store. "Leah. How are you?" he asked, his smile warm and genuine. "You look fantastic. City life suits you." We chatted for a few minutes, catching up on small things. Then, as we were about to part ways, he hesitated. "Listen, this is awkward," he started, "but I figured you'd want to know. I saw Isaac the other day." "Oh?" I said, keeping my expression neutral.
"Yeah."
He's moved out of Victoria Beaumont's place. Apparently, she dumped him. A friend of mine works with her investment firm, and the story is she just got bored. Found a new, more interesting project, I guess. He's staying on his sister's couch. The grocery store faded into the background. Victoria had gotten bored. She had divested. My cynical prediction, uttered in a moment of pain and anger, had come true. He wasn't a partner, he was an asset, and his value had depreciated. I should have felt a surge of vindication, a triumphant, "I told you so." But I didn't. I just felt a deep, weary sadness. Sadness for the man he used to be, who had traded his soul for a fantasy, only to have that fantasy evaporate. "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you," Mark said, seeing the look on my face. "No, it's okay," I managed to say. "Thank you for telling me." I walked home in a daze, the contents of my grocery bags forgotten. He was on Serafina's couch. The great ascent was over. The upgrade had failed. I thought about the hollow look in his eyes in those glossy photographs. He had been performing, and now the show was over. The curtain had come down, the audience had gone home, and he was left alone on an empty stage. I stood on my balcony, looking out at the city lights. They were just lights, simple and real. They didn't promise anything other than what they were. I felt a tremor, not of fear or of pain, but of change. A distant earthquake had just leveled the glittering city he had moved to, and I knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that the aftershocks would be heading my way. The only question was what I would do when they arrived. A week passed. A week of waiting. I felt like I was tracking a storm on a weather map, watching it move slowly but inevitably in my direction. Every time my phone rang with an unknown number, my stomach would clench. Every unexpected email made my breath catch. I was bracing for impact. It came, as I knew it would, in the form of a phone call on a rainy Thursday night. I saw his name flash on the screen. It had been months since I'd seen it there, and for a second, I was transported back to our old life, to a time when a call from him meant he was picking up dinner or was running a few minutes late. I let it ring 4 times, a small act of reclaiming power, before I finally answered. "Hello?" I said, my voice even and calm. "Leah? It's me." His voice was a wreck. It was thin and reedy, stripped of all the false confidence it had acquired over the past year. It was the voice of the boy I'd met in college, not the man who'd walked out my door. "I know," I said. There was a long, ragged sigh on the other end of the line. Can we talk?" he asked, his voice cracking on the last word. "Please. Not on the phone. Can I see you?" My first instinct was a visceral, resounding no. "No, you can't see me. You forfeited that right when you decided I was a box you needed to escape from." But the architect in me, the part that needs to survey the damage before deciding on a course of action, was curious. What did he want? An apology? Forgiveness? Absolution? I needed to see the ruin up close to understand its nature. "Fine," I said, my tone brisk and businesslike. "There's a coffee shop on the corner of Elm and 4th, near my office. Tomorrow. 10 o'clock. I chose the location deliberately. It was neutral ground, my territory, not his. It was public, a safeguard against a scene. "Okay," he whispered, sounding pathetically grateful. Thank you. I'll be there. I arrived at 10 on the dot, ordered a black coffee, and chose a small table in the corner that gave me a clear view of the door. I felt strangely calm, like I was preparing for a client meeting about a difficult demolition. I was there to assess, to listen, and to make a final, informed decision. He arrived 5 minutes later, and I almost didn't recognize him. The change was shocking. The sleek, expensive suits were gone, replaced by a simple, slightly rumpled sweater and jeans. The arrogant posture was gone, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He looked thin and tired, with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. This was not the man from Serafina's Instagram posts. This was the ghost of the man I had married, haunting the edges of a life he had thrown away. He saw me and shuffled over, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Hi," he mumbled, sliding into the chair opposite me. "Isaac," I said, my voice giving nothing away. He finally met my gaze, and his eyes were swimming with a desperation I had never seen before. "Leah, I am so sorry," he began, the words tumbling out in a rush. I know that word is useless. I know it means nothing after what I did. But I have to say it. I was a fool. An arrogant, blind, pathetic fool. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Saying nothing, letting him talk. "Everything you said, it was all true," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "You were right. About everything. About Victoria. I wasn't a partner. I was a pet. A novelty. Something she could show off for a while until she got tired of it. The moment I started having my own opinions, the moment I wasn't just a smiling accessory who agreed with everything she said, she was done with me. She told me to pack my things and be gone by the end of the day. Just like that." He let out a shaky breath. "And Serafina, my God, Serafina. She was all about living your truth and manifesting abundance when I was with Victoria. The second I showed up on her doorstep with a suitcase, she started talking about toxic energy and how I needed to take accountability for my own low vibrational choices. I've been sleeping on her couch for a week, and every day is a lecture. She doesn't care about me, Leah. She just cared about the status I gave her." He looked down at his hands, which were trembling on the table. "I threw away the only real thing in my life for a fantasy. For a cheap imitation. I threw you away." Tears welled in his eyes, and this time, they looked real. Not the self-pitying tears of before, but the gut-wrenching tears of genuine regret. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "I know I have no right to ask this. I know I deserve nothing from you. But I have to ask. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Can I come home?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy and impossible. Can I come home? He wasn't just asking to come back to a place. He was asking to come back to a time. He was asking me to pretend the earthquake had never happened, to glue the shattered pieces of our life back together and act like they were whole. He was asking me to be the comfortable, forgiving lamp he had abandoned in his search for a brighter light. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the pain in his eyes, the genuine remorse. A part of my heart, the old, foolish part, ached for him. But then I looked past him, through the coffee shop window, at the life I had built without him. My new apartment. My successful project. My peace. My solid, unshakable foundation. I took a deep breath, the smell of coffee and rain filling my lungs. I knew my answer. I had known it since the day he walked out. But now, it was time to say it out loud. I let his question sit in the space between us for a long moment, allowing its weight to be felt. Can I come home? It was a question born of his desperation, not of my reality. He was looking at me, but he wasn't seeing me, not the woman I had become. He was seeing a refuge, a harbor in his self-made storm. Finally, I spoke, my voice quiet but firm, holding no anger, only a deep, settled clarity. There is no home to come back to, Isaac. He flinched. Confusion clouding his tear-filled eyes. What do you mean? We can find a new place. We can start over. I'll do anything, Leah. I'll go to therapy, I'll never speak to my sister again, No, I interrupted gently, holding up a hand. You don't understand. The home we had wasn't just the house. It wasn't the furniture or the photos on the wall. It was the trust we had. It was the respect. It was the belief that we were a team, building one life together. I leaned forward slightly, my gaze unwavering. As an architect, I know that the most important part of any structure is its foundation. If the foundation is compromised, you can patch the walls and repaint the rooms, but the building is not sound. It will never be safe. At the first sign of another tremor, it will collapse. I watched as the meaning of my words slowly dawned on his face. The hope in his eyes began to flicker and fade, replaced by the dawning of a devastating understanding. You didn't just leave me, Isaac, I continued, my voice steady. You shattered our foundation. You told me I wasn't enough. You told me the life we built was a box, a prison. You threw it all away for something you thought was better, shinier. And now that the shiny thing has broken, you want to come back to the thing you deemed worthless. You're not here because you suddenly realized you love me. You're here because you're lost, and I am a familiar landmark. He opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. He just shook his head, a silent, desperate denial. I have spent the last year rebuilding, I said, a sense of calm strength flowing through me. I had to demolish what was left of our life because it was unsafe to live in. And I built something new, from the ground up. It's smaller, for now, and it's just for me. But the foundation is solid. It's made of self-respect, peace, and the hard-won knowledge that I am enough on my own. My life is not a rehab facility for your mistakes. The finality of my words settled over the table. The conversation was over. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a statement of fact. I do forgive you, I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. I forgive you for being weak and foolish. I forgive you for the pain you caused me, because in surviving it, I found a strength I never knew I had. But forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. Forgiveness is for my peace, not for your comfort. I can't let you back into my life. The person you're looking for, the woman who would have taken you back without a second thought, she doesn't live here anymore. I demolished that version of myself along with the house. Tears were now streaming freely down his face. He didn't try to wipe them away. He just sat there, broken. I understand, he finally whispered, his voice hoarse. I destroyed it. I destroyed everything. Yes, I said softly, without malice. You did. I stood up, placing a $10 bill on the table for our coffees. I hope you find your way, Isaac. I hope you learn to build a life based on something real, something you value for what it is, not for what it looks like to other people. I truly wish you peace. And then I did what I should have done the moment I first heard Serafina's poison on his lips. I turned around, and I walked away. I didn't look back. I walked out of the coffee shop and into the rain, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt a profound sense of closure. I felt free. I was walking toward my own future, a future I was designing myself, on a foundation that no one could ever shatter again. So, for anyone out there who has been left behind, who has been made to feel like you are not enough, let me tell you this, your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to see it. You are not a before a picture. You are the whole, entire, beautiful project. Spend your time restoring your own magnificent structure, and don't ever give the blueprints to someone who only values a pretty facade. After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories. We are all human. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon.